All right, let's clear something up that trips up a lot of people in digital security. The difference between authentication and authorization. I know they sound almost the same, but understanding how they're different is absolutely key to getting how pretty much every secure system you use actually works. I'm sure this has happened to you. You log into a website, everything seems fine, it knows who you are, but then you try to click on, say, the admin settings, and boom, you get an access denied message. That exact moment, that's the perfect illustration of authentication and authorization doing their separate jobs. You know, the easiest way to remember this is to boil it down to two simple questions. Authentication is all about identity. It's the system basically asking, who are you? But authorization, that's all about permissions. It asks, okay, I know who you are, but what are you actually allowed to do here? So let's break that down. We're going to start with step one in any secure process, authentication. This is all about proving you are who you say you are. At its heart, authentication is just the process of verification. Are you really who you claim to be? Think of it like a bouncer at a club checking your ID. The system needs some kind of proof before it even thinks about letting you in the door. And honestly, we're authenticating ourselves all day long. The classic username and password, that's authentication. That little 6-digit code that gets texted to your phone, yep, also authentication. Using your fingerprint or Face ID, that's what we call biometric authentication. And even when you click Login with Google, you're just using Google to prove your identity to some other website. It's all the same idea. Okay, so the system knows who you are. You're in. But that's only half the battle. Now the system has to figure out what you're actually allowed to do. And that, my friends, brings us to authorization. Now, the most crucial point here is that authorization always comes after you've been successfully authenticated. Once your identity is confirmed, the system looks up its rulebook to see what permissions your account has. Are you just a guest, a regular user, or maybe you're an administrator? That level of authorization is going to determine everything you can and can't do next. We usually see this handled through different user roles. In a typical company system, an admin has the highest level of authorization. They can delete stuff. A manager might be authorized to see special reports, while a regular user can only mess with their own files. See? Everyone is authenticated on the same system, but their authorization level gives them a completely different experience. If this is still a little fuzzy, don't worry. I have the perfect real-world analogy that makes this crystal clear. Just think about going to the airport. So you walk up to the security checkpoint. First thing they ask for, your passport. They look at your photo, they look at your name, and they verify your identity. That's it. This is authentication. Your passport's only job is to prove you are who you say you are. It doesn't say a thing about which flight you're on. But then, you have your boarding pass. Now that is your authorization. Your boarding pass is basically a list of very specific permissions that tells the airport staff exactly what you're allowed to do. Think about it. Your boarding pass authorizes you to go to a specific gate, say gate B24, but it won't let you into gate C12. If you have a first-class ticket, it might authorize you to get into the VIP lounge. And most importantly, it's the thing that gives you permission to actually board the plane. Your passport alone, your authentication, is not getting you on that flight. So you see, you absolutely need both. They're two totally separate steps, and they have to work together in the right order to make the whole system secure.
And the sequence is always, and I mean always, the same. First, you authenticate. You prove who you are. Only after that's done successfully does the system move on to authorization, where it checks its rules to see what you're allowed to touch. And the result of that check is what decides whether you get in or get blocked.
Okay, so we know the difference. But why is getting this right so critical? Well, because the stakes here are unbelievably high. Look, if a system has rock-solid authentication but really weak authorization, it's like having a giant vault door on a bank but leaving all the safe deposit boxes inside wide open. An authenticated user could wander around and access sensitive data they should never see, and that leads to huge data leaks, unauthorized actions, maybe even a full-blown system breach. At the end of the day, you just can't have one without the other. They are the two pillars of access control. If either one of them is weak, the whole security structure could just collapse.
All right, let's wrap this all up. We're going to do one last side-by-side comparison to lock this in for good.
Putting them next to each other just makes it so clear, doesn't it? Authentication is the key that gets you in the front door. It happens first. It's all about identity. Authorization, on the other hand, determines which rooms you can go into once you're inside.
It happens second, and it's all about permissions. It's the simple difference between asking, "Who are you?" versus "What can you do?"
And there you have it. If you remember nothing else, just burn this one sentence into your brain. Authentication proves who you are, and authorization decides what you're allowed to do. So now we've got it straight. But since everything really does start with that very first step, proving who you are, it kind of begs a really important question, right? How can we make that authentication step even stronger? Especially when we know a simple password just isn't enough anymore. Well, that's exactly what we'll dig into next time.